the big puzzle, the big vision of my glory, my fulfillment, everything that I am, he's like, includes each one of you. Each one of you is a puzzle piece.
Tulsa Talks is the podcast that is inspiring people to have everyday meaningful conversations to gain perspective and help the world.
Welcome to Tulsa Talks. Amy Melrose is our guest today, and she's going to talk about faith in action. Amy is a former nurse, surgery nurse. Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about you in like 1 or 2 minutes of your background of before you stepped out and stopped nursing.
Yeah. I had many years, decades of experience in business, marketing, advertising, design, and I moved on from that into the healthcare field and had a couple of decades in that as well. The Lord kind of opened my eyes to some of the, I would say, injustices of the healthcare that happens in traditional medicine today. And I kind of got to the end of my, rope of being, I'd had success, probably the highest paying and the best nursing job you could get. I worked 8 to 5 generally, unless a surgical procedure went longer, but Monday through Friday. And a lot of nurses like really long for that position.
Yeah, nurses need to be there at night and everything, don't they, on the weekends?
Well, yeah, typically. So I worked I worked in a trauma level 1 hospital, but I had clock in at 8 and clock out at 5. So people, when I walked away from nursing, thought I'd lost my ever-loving mind. But so that kind of gives a nutshell of
why did you walk away?
Well, a combination of things. I had the best of everything the world could provide to me, as far as house, cars, success, financial position and such, but I was really empty inside. I sat in the church pews on antidepressants. My husband had an affair and I lost my marriage. I was broken, and aside of the fact that I saw some of the injustices in the medical field, I was just like, God, there's got to be more. And I heard him say, there's more.
And how old were you when this happened?
I was 51. And
how many years ago?
7. You doing the math?
No. Well, yes.
Yeah. So
wasn't concerned about how old you are, but just, 51-year-old person to walk away from a career is one thing. And then I was wondering how long you had actually stepped out and been living this post-career life.
Yeah, it's been 7 years.
And yes, I did do the math. Doesn't take just a second for me to do math. I've always been somewhat okay with simple math.
Yep.
So
celebrating 40th high school reunion this year.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
So 7 years post career or new career move.
I didn't look at it as a new career.
What's your definition of a career?
Career is like something that you work for somebody else and you kind of fulfill the objectives that they have set in place, and you look to them as your provider.
Yeah.
And
I look at career differently.
Okay.
Career is spelled CAREER. So my care ER is my life purpose as I live every moment of my life. I didn't always realize that, but I'm a carer. So God has gifted me with the ability to live beyond reason, and because what I'm doing is not reasonable. I think you align with that.
Yes, for sure. I appreciate that, take on career. I guess I would say that's more aligned with my expression of my being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the expression of our being can be our career when we're not entrapped into man's system.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big one.
So what does the last 7 years look like?
Well, I sold everything I owned and bought a cargo van. Empty cargo van. I took the bulkhead out and put a bed and had a bathroom. I put solar panels. I put a skylight in it and fans. And I, at the direction of the Lord, kind of just headed out to Arizona. So I was living in New York at the time. And so I headed out to the BLM lands of Arizona. And if you're familiar with that, Bureau of Land Management, you can park anywhere on these. There's certain, criteria that you have to, and rules you have to follow. And then there's this unspoken kind of, if you're familiar with van lifers. And I learned everything that I know and to fashion out that van into a tiny home through YouTube. So I, spent hours of listening to YouTubes and then implementing it into the van. I actually did some very untraditional things, though. I wanted insulation, but at that point in my journey, I was really tied up in like how everything outgasses and like the toxins in our food. And I just was riddled with fear of the end times, fear of, society, fear of everything. This was when I was just leaving nursing and I was broken and wanting more. I was preparing to go after what God was showing me that there's
whatever
more.
It was. You just knew there was more.
I knew
were
there
in
was
a tumultuous
more.
time. You walked away.
I walked away.
Drove away.
Right. But I found an alpaca farmer and I bought his, what they called their seconds. I think they were thirds or fourths, but they're shearing fur. And I took it and washed it out and carded it like you card wool and made batting and insulated my van with alpaca fiber. Anyways.
So alpaca fiber that is like forward facing inside your van?
Yeah. And then I put cedar paneling overside of it,
Okay.
So it was fun. I learned a lot. It was fun. It was about 4 months. Then I headed to Arizona and I was in the desert. And the deal is for van lifers, the etiquette is that you have to park where there's no other van lifer in sight. That's just kind of an unspoken etiquette rule, just to give each other privacy. So I'm like driving through, and in hindsight, I look back and as much fear as I was living in at the time, I was amazed that I did not have fear of what I was doing in that regard. But I just found a place where I basically couldn't see. I could see way off in the distance, one or two other vans. But I was basically alone. And so I hopped up through my sunroof, a skylight, and got up on the top of the van. And I'm looking at the stars. I'm like, okay, I'm here, God. Where's your more? I'm ready. And I just got so hit by the love, the power of God. It was, I've tried to explain it time and time again and over the last 7 years. And there's really no words that do it justice. But I'll tell you the outcome of it was I was on antidepressants. I cold turkey stopped those. I was just like, I knew in my spirit, like, that I didn't need them anymore. I had so much joy. I had so much life. I had so much hope. All of these things that were drained out of my life just kind of fled back in. And I was just overwhelmed by the goodness of God. And I was just like, 51 years of living just victimville, subject to emotional roller coaster, trying to make people happy, broken relationships. The only thing that I had really success in was my career. My career. I had a lot of success in my career, and but
because you cared about people, or what was the reason? What was your driving force for your career?
I started working with my family's business when I was 7 years old. I'd worked alongside my father for decades. Starting as a very young child. My work ethic was you work hard. You just a hard worker.
Yeah, do what it takes.
You do what it takes. And that's really a lot of where you get your value, you know?
So you were getting your self-worth from
my
it?
Self-worth, my security, my value, pretty much everything was coming from my career. And it's not sustainable. You can buy a really nice house and it's cool for a little while, but it's not filling that space that God created us to have Him interacting and being a part of. It's not how He created. And I always knew that, like, as a little girl, I experienced God as love. And through the years, my family would go in and out of all sorts of different churches looking for, kind of like the answer. And oftentimes we ended up back in nature. And my mom would say, this is where I feel God the most. And
so you kind of bought into that by driving from New York out to Arizona? And
I don't know if I bought into that, because after I came to know Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and my life did change. There was an element of life that was sparked in that. But
how old were you when that happened?
I was 32 at the time.
So
33.
19 years later, you're sitting in a church on antidepressants, just going through a divorce, wondering what next step is. You had enough of it, whatever it was, to walk away from it and build your van and drive to Arizona. So you knew there was more.
Well, I had a heart-to-heart with God and said, I'm just not feeling it. What is going on? And that's when He said, there's more. Yeah. I think people are afraid to have heart-to-hearts with God, and because I was just like, I'm done, man. I'm over everything. I'm not done. I'm done with church. I'm done.
Why would somebody be afraid to have a heart-to-heart with God? The one that loves their soul and knows them better than they know themselves.
Right. Well, that's a really good question, and a whole probably We're
talking about faith in action, right. So can we not talk about why somebody would not want to have faith in action? Because to have actionable faith,
I guess it
has to have a heart-to-heart with God.
I guess it would go back to fear of
Adam and Eve fear, where you're trying to cover yourself up and hide from God,
perhaps,
and maybe hide from yourself.
But you know what it is, and I'm just getting this, is that it's not. They don't understand who God really is.
Neither did Adam and Eve. Even though they walked with Him communally, they did not have God living in them like we can have now.
They didn't know God as a loving God.
Isn't that crazy? They walked with God in the Garden of Eden, but they didn't have His Spirit dwelling in them like we can now.
Right. And that's the thing that motivates me, and I don't want to run to the finish line here, but
I do. I want to run the whole journey. Let's go.
There is so much that God has for us that people are limiting themselves by the fear of God.
Why the answer is the world. Do you fear God? You ever heard that phrase, why in the world? That's the answer. Because people are attached to the world and their insecurities instead of being open to something that is more than they've ever imagined. They're afraid that God is real. And if God is real, then what? How would that affect Christianity?
Well, they wouldn't fit into a lot of the circles,
Wouldn't fit into religion?
Yeah. I've been called a heretic. I've had my loved ones, those who know me the best, don't question it.
Why?
Because they see it.
Why are you a heretic?
Well, because I'm believing that God created us, not only He created us to be co-laborers with Him. He didn't create us to just sit and wait for something to manifest in our lives. He wants.
Neither did He make us work for ourselves in our own abilities.
I think He. I guess I'm not getting completely what you're.
There's a movement that you just painted that's really far one side that says we're not to work, we're just to watch. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Then there's another one that says I've got to work.
Yeah.
And I'm not watching.
Yeah.
And the balance.
Right. And that's the
watching
thing.
Him work through us as we live an amazing adventure, to me.
Yeah. The phrase deconstruction is such a hot topic.
Yeah.
And
deconstructed burger. Is that what you're talking about?
Deconstruction from religion.
Unlearning
what has been learned. But what I have seen is it's like a fruit scale. You know how you put your fruit on the scale and it goes way down, but then it gets to where it's supposed to be, right? And I kind of feel like that's a thing. Like we're living suppressed. We're like I was in the pews, depressed and whatever. And then I get launched into this freedom, but then I'm way over here going, yahoo, God, love you. This is awesome. But then you kind of get to this middle ground where you see clearly, and it's not what was going on in the church was not all bad, and what was going on here wasn't all bad. But I believe the road that God has for us is very, very much in the middle and not extreme.
Yeah.
Although people have looked at me and said I live pretty extremely.
How does faith in action look in your life now? So we got to where you're out in Arizona. You've had these different experiences. Some people think that you're a little off base. Your children know that you're living, or people that are around you know that you're just living your life now differently than you had. You might be a little extreme in some people's books, but you're in Arizona now getting this new revelation. What's next?
Yeah, I really want to take you through the journey of how I got into the healing. Because I was in the healthcare field for many decades, I naturally continued in that healing journey, but with God. And I studied with John G. Lake Ministries and became a divine healing technician, and would go to...
I don't know who that is or what that means.
John G. Lake well, his ministry now is carried out through a ministry down in Texas who took the teachings of John G. Lake, who abolished the plague down in Africa. He was able to have, I believe it was the bubonic plague, put in his hand and a microscope verify that the virus was dead at his touch. So I went down that path for a while and got involved in teaching and traveling with different ministries, actually teaching people. I saw miracles. I saw people get off of their deathbed. I've seen the power of God in that regard. But what I was seeing is people were going after the healing instead of after the healer. And people that we would minister to I love, building them up and, their identity of who they are in Christ. But then the focus being on healing, it got to be like they would look for the outcomes of somebody being healed. And if somebody was healed, I could see a lot of people go into kind of pride. Like, I healed them. Look at me. I'm doing something. I've really got it going on. And then people that weren't getting any results that they saw, that's a thing, we have, I believe, a lot of results we don't see, but they would go into kind of this condemnation. And I was just like, Lord, this is not you. This is not you. And so I walked away from that. Yeah.
Religion sucks. And that's what you're describing here. You're talking about man's expectations over God's demonstration. And trying to force the hand of God to be what you want. And if you're not doing it, then you're disappointed with you and him.
That's it. I actually saw people walk away from faith.
I would. I'd walk away for a little while to be able to be recentered. Probably that's been my life. I have walked away. I was like, okay, no. And then, but wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's more. And just that's.
So you went through the healing, you walked away from it. Now what?
Yeah, I had put together different tours with this healing ministry that I was traveling with. And the Lord kind of pulled me away from it. And I went back to my hometown, and I'm like, okay, Lord, what's next?
Back to New York?
Back to New York.
It's a long drive, not knowing where you're going.
Right. And I'm like, what's next? But I needed to kind of recenter, regroup, figure things out. But I was looking for another group of on fire believers that I could kind of align myself with to do life, minister, whatever. And the Lord said, my mom and dad had a large home that needed downsizing, and they had a lot of stuff. And I have a big family, but they had all kind of come to their rope's end of like, we can't do this. That some of them worked, some of them, whatever. So the Lord said, you're going to downsize your parents' house and sell it for them. And so I'm like, this is not the assignment I was looking for. And he's like, this is it. This is what we're doing. I'm like, all right, then it's going to be with you, because I'm not really great at organizing. That's not my forte. And, this is a lot of crap. And like, I don't know what to do with it all. So I got my mom and dad moved into a temporary home so that I could kind of just go through their house and do what needed to be done. And I said, okay, Jesus, you and me, we'll do this. I know all things are possible with you. I'm like, you lead the way. So every morning I'd have coffee and sit and I'd read scripture and spend time just, contemplating the things of the Lord and just the things the revelations he'd shown me and the truths that I knew. And he would talk to me. And I'm
Get
like,
out of here. God would talk to you.
Yes. It was actually, in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because some days it would get going on 11 o'clock or noon, and I'd be like, Lord, I got to get on this project. But it was amazing at how productive I could be when I was actually doing the work of clearing out the house and stuff. And because he told me, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. I want you to call this person and that person. And I'd have people coming into the house, movers, carpet cleaners, just different repairmen. I found a handyman guy, and all these people were people that I could minister to and just ask questions about their faith and their walk. And then it drew out to them. One young set of guys that came to move something, the Lord was prompting me to tell them about the goodness of God and a life in Christ. And one of the driver was a believer, and he had been ministering to his buddy that was working with him. And so when I started talking, he hit him. He goes, this is what I've been telling you about. Listen to her. And so it's like the timing and the people that walked through the door. One guy, he'd been living with his girlfriend for, 5 years. And I had said to him, I'm like, just asking him questions. I'm like, are you going to marry her? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I think that you need to make the decision, either marry her or move on. Like, and he's just like, God just told me that this morning on the way here. And I was just like, but just so many of those things that God just kind of was able to speak through me to these people. And so it was fun, and I got the job done. And one of the things was I really wanted it to speak to my family of the goodness of God, that I couldn't do this on my own, that it really was with him that all things are possible. And I believe that they saw the power of God in action, faith in action. And so I was, the house was about to sell. 2 days away, I was walking the halls. It was empty, and I'm praying in the Spirit. And
what does that mean?
I'm just speaking a language that God has given us. That's basically God speaking unto himself through us.
Yeah. God's love flowing through you back to him.
Yeah.
And others.
Yes. And I was, it was rattling from deep within my spirit, just a desire to be connected with some on fire believers. And I'd had a tour that this healing ministry did through the Midwest and out through California. And when I left that ministry, the Lord said, I don't want you to contact anybody that you met. And I met some really awesome people. And he said, if they can reach out to you, that's cool, but I don't want you reaching out to anybody. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm walking the halls, praying in the Spirit. And the Holy Ghost, I'm like on fire believers that I can come alongside and, do ministry, do life, be a light in darkness. I didn't really know what that looked like. I got a text message from a woman that I'd met out on the West Coast. And she said she had remembered that I was a nurse. And she had a minister coming out to minister to their group that they had out in Orange County, California. And I read that text message, and there was one chair left in this room I was in, And I fell back into the chair. Like, I knew, like, that power that hit me in the desert, like that power that hits when you know it's God, it is just something that ignites within you. I knew that this was an answer to prayer. And so she's like, I'm having a small procedure done, and I wondered if you wouldn't mind coming out, hanging with me and my kids. And she was a single mom at the time. And she's like, and stay, I've got this minister coming to preach. And so in the natural, I was like, how am I going to get there? How is this all going to work? I didn't know, but I knew that I had to say yes. Like, this was something that the Lord really wanted me to do. So I got to California. It was like a week and a half later. It was quick. The house had sold. Everything was squared away with my parents.
And what year was this?
This was 23.
Okay.
And
so this is 6 years into the time you walked away. Is that right? No, excuse me. 23, 2 years ago, 5 years into the time you walked away from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I'd been, doing a lot with a lot of different ministries and meeting people and different things, but I never found the place that I was to kind of quote unquote align myself with. I didn't want to be put in a box. I didn't want constructs. The Lord really showed me that the way that it's been done, life, let's just say life, the way that life has been done and modeled for us, whether religious or, secular, whatever you want to call it, I don't see very many successful people. I mean, you can say success is having a lot of money, but are these people happy? And I would say that I've seen a lot of them not so happy. I don't believe money brings you happiness.
Sure. But you said that your parents had a big house.
They had
and that they sold it, and that you were a nurse, and you were successful with your career, and
it didn't bring it. There was emptiness in my walk, and I think for like my parents, they came to know the Lord, and I believe that their peace definitely came, although they experienced success through the years. In the latter years, after I came to know the Lord and I, shared the gospel with them, and I see change in their aspiration. Like, they dialed back a little bit from going after the dollar and going after success from that standpoint, I would say. And their life became a little bit more simple.
Yeah.
And fulfilled.
Yeah.
My dad just passed 2 months ago yesterday. And my mom and dad would be celebrating 65 years of marriage on the 18th of this month. So, their relationship definitely went through a lot of different seasons, but I would say that the end season was their most peaceful and fulfilling. And that's where they had the relationship with God that was getting deeper and more developed. So that was a blessing.
Yeah. So you're looking for something outside the box. You don't even want a box to exist because you've experienced that through church, then through a healing ministry, and then you had a bit of a taste of God's flow in a more real way as you as you make this house ready to be sold.
Yes.
Then what's next?
So I got a text message from a woman that I had met in this tour that we did, the healing ministry tour out on the West Coast. And we had connected. I had had the opportunity to spend time with her and her kids. And we had really connected, instant connection. but the Lord told me, to refrain from reaching out to people. So, I honored that, and I trusted that there was purpose. When God tells us stuff, there's always purpose behind it.
We don't always see the reason, but
we don't always see the reason. And I'll tell you, it was 5 years in, and in those 5 years, I worked out a lot of that stuff where, well, I don't really understand that, God. I don't think that's a thing. And then I went about doing my own thing, and then he showed me. So there was a lot of experiences of faith in action, man. That was, but here we are.
Even when you're pulled back a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can, faith in inactivity can show you what faith in action might do.
Well, it's what are you putting your faith in? You putting it in yourself, or are you putting it in God? So faith in action. There was times I still tried to, I call it strong arm. I mean, I had so much success in business and financial pieces of my life that, I thought a lot of times I could make it happen for myself. But what I was going after, that didn't work that way. And I learned it a lot of times the hard way. But it got me to a point where when I heard God speak, I knew there was purpose in it. I didn't need to hold on to trying to reason it out or make sense of it. I trusted that there was a purpose. Even in the times, because I was traveling, during these times, I was traveling alone across country. A total of 10 times in the last 7 years, I've gone across the U.S.
Wow.
I've met a lot of people, ministered to a lot of people, but I've executed a lot of my own will, or squelching what I knew in my spirit that the Lord wanted me to do, and I didn't do. And then oftentimes he would show me the outcome and how different it would have been. So so that was definitely interesting to go through. And when I got a call from the woman that I connected with out on the West Coast, as I said, immediately I knew that I was to go out there. And I did, and I landed in San Diego, and she picked me up from the airport, and she had been doing a discipleship training of her own with another gentleman that we met along the healing tour, who was down in San Diego. And so the three of us met for lunch, and it was amazing, just even in that lunch, looking back on it, God was beginning to create a foundation with the three of us from that moment on. And we left lunch, we prayed for people, on the street. And it was just really an awesome experience right from the get-go. On the way back up to Orange County, the Lord started giving me this vision of a church. And I'm like, you're going to start a church. And I started seeing what it looked like. And I started just speaking it out. And it rose in her this word that she had gotten from a woman probably 6 months prior, that she was going to lead a church. And so that culminated, and I was there for 3 weeks. And 2 days after I left, they had their first church service.
What city is that in?
That is in San Juan Capistrano, and it's New Creation Fellowship Church. And I'm on the board, and I'm a minister with the church. And I do a lot with them through Zoom, but they've become my best friends, and we talk a lot. We share a lot, but the most awesome part of it is that we're all of us not trying to fit into a box. We're trying to put the fullness of God, the faith that he has given us, in action, and not be so attached to what the world is deemed as normal or right or okay.
What's the difference in that church and the other churches?
Where the church started to where it is today is very different. So it's a progressive. We're continually learning. We're continually going after it. We're not putting a flag in the sand and putting an umbrella of, oh, this is a denomination that we are in, or that this is the answer. We have some foundational truths. We believe in the virgin birth, that Jesus came, died, resurrected, rose again. But there's so much that from that point forward that God purposed for us to live in that we have not yet seen lived out. So we're hungry, we're going after it. And so there's a deconstruction, and then there's a kind of a reconstruction. I would say that we're just in this continual reconstruction, because the Lord told me, he says, Amy, there's always going to be more. And I said, I believe you, Lord, there's always going to be more. So I believe that to be a church that's in a state of continual reconstruction, to be able to continually go after that more, but not just, in theory, not just in knowledge, right? But to actually walk it out, to actually become the being that God created each of us to be.
Do you think it's possible to be that being and not be aware that you are? So do you think it's possible when you were nursing to have actually been the being that God had you to be at that time in your life, to be prepared for this step?
Yeah, I always caution people when I share, and actually the Lord has had me be pretty quiet, because a lot of what happens is people get their identity wrapped up in their career or their past. And I had,
or maybe how somebody else has experienced God.
Their identity is wrapped up in things that
not them,
are not who God created them to be.
Yeah.
And so the Lord really had me pretty quiet. I would share different things one-on-one, ministering to people, but sharing my testimony is really relatively new. Because I don't want people to look at it as a formula, or a destination. I want to encourage people to have that relationship with God, to have him reveal the fullness of who they are directly from him.
Yeah. Yeah, and reveal it to them.
To reveal it to them. Because
he knows more about what and who they should be than they do themselves.
Yes, and I don't believe that we're created to be the same. The Lord often shows me life in visions and pictures. And he showed me in the beginning when I was working towards, deconstructing, trying to figure it all out. When I knew that this was an element of truth, but I didn't know how it fit into the bigger picture. And I wasted a lot of time in those 5 years prior to up to this point where I'm talking that we're at, trying to figure out where does that belong in the big picture. And he finally showed me a puzzle, and he said, you have yet to have the pieces that are around it be revealed to know where this piece goes. So this is truth. You know that. Put it aside, set it there, and carry on. Don't be trying to figure it out in our own mind where this piece belongs. And so then carrying on further, took me back to the puzzle, and he says, the big puzzle, the big vision of my glory, my fulfillment, everything that I am, he's like, includes each one of you. Each one of you is a puzzle piece.
Do you know the name of our ministry?
No.
The Complete Peace Movement, where everybody realizes and can say for themselves, I am one piece.
Okay. All right. Well, I am there. And the Lord showed me back to this puzzle. And he said, you are over here. You're a little bit of mountain and you've got some sky poking through. So a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, and you've got 4 pokey outies. And so the person that's next to you can't have pokey outies too, or you wouldn't fit in to reveal the sky and the little bit of the mountain. So we can't look to other people, excuse me, to define ourselves.
Yeah.
Or to see where we are.
Do you think that we can have tools given to us by others?
Absolutely.
That can equip us.
I think that's the beauty of being, I came into town to spend some time with Serge, DeRosa, and Urban Eden. And
Christy, I guess.
And Christy, yes, and Christy. I am looking forward to getting to spend some more time with her. It was a little bit limited, but I knew that the Lord wanted me to come into town. I didn't know why, but I'm on my way out of town now, and I'm certain why I was supposed to be here. It was an amazing weekend, and I got so many golden nuggets of truth from the group and being a part of just what they're doing here. And I'm on fire in a way that, the Lord knew I needed to be around these people. And so, yeah, absolutely. And, I hope that I was able to ignite something in them, water some of their seeds, maybe plant a few seeds. So, yeah, absolutely. We can, God speaks to us through each other too, God.
Do you think that he can speak through you through a sinner?
Absolutely. He used a mule or whatever, a donkey, right? I believe that's true. And when you say, can you be the full expression of who God created you to be in a position like nursing? If God leads you there, yes, absolutely, 100%. And I'm so grateful. There are a lot of ministers that are preaching right now below what their revelation is. And I'm so grateful for them, because I couldn't do it. I wasn't created that way, but I believe that the way that God created them is to instill them into a body of believers and gently bring them to revelations that some people, might be walking in, but they could call him a heretic. But this minister, his assignment is to just gently bring them into an awareness that they wouldn't have otherwise come to. So I do not judge people. One of the things that, having gone through the passing of my father, brought to me, and why I really believe the Lord is opening up doors for me to talk now, is a piece that I think is really critical. People came up to me to share their sympathy with me in the passing of my father, or how they behaved, or how they interacted with me around the passing of my dad was weird. A lot of people, they're just weird. Like they don't know how to handle, death, I guess, or whatever. But I was sitting with the Lord with it, and he said, people don't know what they don't know. And I was just like, we can't expect somebody to, respond in such a way if they've never been there. They don't know. And it gave me this grace for other people that I really believe God wanted me to have. I see other people, and instead of saying, oh, they'll get there one day, I see, wow, it's beautiful where they are. I love the piece that they have in the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that all people have a piece in the puzzle.
I do too.
I think that God has us exactly where he needs us to be to have these aha moments that equip the body better than it would be any other way, because it would be out of timing.
Mm-hmm.
And timing is very important. If you're trying to bake a cake and you cook it for 3 minutes or 2 hours, it might be a little out of timing.
Yeah, and that's a really big piece of, if you had asked me to join you to do a podcast a few months ago, I would have had to say no, because the Lord had had me in a season of being quiet. Part of it was, I think, this extra piece of grace. And I had grace for other people, but it's deeper. It's so deep now, in such a way that there's not a little grace and a little, question. It's full on. And so I don't look to your response to me as validating how I'm doing.
You're disappointing me. I thought I was your God.
Well, you know what? Back in the day, you would have been. I was a people pleaser. And man, I remember towards the end of that tour, the healing tour that I was on, the Lord spoke to me and said, girl, where I'm taking you, you got to get rid of that people pleasing. He's like, because you're putting people where I belong. And I am the one that says, you're doing awesome. I set the bar. People don't set the bar. And the beautiful thing about God is that he's the same always. And he's brought us to victory. So we're, in him, we're victorious, and we're complete, and we're whole and accepted, and we're beloved, and we're all the things, and so much more. That's the thing. There's more. There's always more.
No, I've arrived. You've not arrived?
Right. Well,
You don't know God fully in depth of all things and all people and everything that he's ever created?
Yeah, I'll say, oh, man, God, there's more. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
There's more.
Yeah, like the old commercial?
Yeah.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. And so you asked the difference in what the church and New Creation Fellowship Church is. And what it stands for. And it's basically going after the more. Believing that there's more, that God is our provider, and that, there's nobody that we have to get approval from. So it looks very different than a lot of churches, but there's been a lot of lives that have been changed through it. We just had a major conference out there, Ministers of Reconciliation Conference, and we had ministers from New Zealand and Australia and Florida. And
I think Serge told me that he went.
Yes, he did. He joined us. Amazing groups of people that were there. And a part of what made that conference what it was is that it was really clear to us that we were to have time of fellowship, breaking bread together, where the people that were in attendance had time to connect with each other. And we had lots of that. And it was just so rich. It was so good. And yeah, John Tussey from Hawaii, who does music, spirit-led music in Frequency of Heaven, joined us. And that was really awesome. And yeah, we had some impromptu blessings of people sharing their gift of music with us as well. One of them from Oklahoma here, Rachel, that we had met at a previous conference. She blessed us, and a young boy that's been part of the ministry, he's so exuberant, and I just love this kid. But he is so expressive, and in a classroom setting, being expressive is kind of, people are like, okay, you got to stay in your seat. And I remember those days. So I'm like, I was so grateful to see the Lord open up a space for him. He got up on stage and sang, "Mary, do you know?" And he got a standing ovation. 10 years old, I think this kiddo is. And yeah, so it was beautiful. It was a beautiful conference. And and I'm just believing that there's going to be more opportunities, and we'll see what God has in store.
Thank you for taking the opportunity by coming by and talking with Tulsa Talks and the Complete
thank
Peace
you for
Movement.
having me. Yeah.
We are here to help you discover or develop your passions, how you can use them, and why you exist. How can we help you help others better?